Title: The Mountain Cabin Battle. Once upon a time, in a small town surrounded by tall mountains and thick forests, there lived a woman named Laura. Laura dreamed of building her very own cabin in the mountains. She imagined the relaxing weekends, the cool air, and the beauty of nature all around her. After many months of saving and planning, she finally bought a piece of land on the edge of the forest where she could build her dream cabin. Laura was excited. She pored over her blueprints, making sure everything was perfect. She visited the city hall to get her building permits. The workers there were helpful, and they assured her that everything was in order. Laura left the office feeling proud. She finally had all the permits she needed to start her cabin. Once Laura got back to her land, she was ready to break ground. She gathered her tools and began marking out where her cabin would stand. Laura imagined herself sitting on the porch, sipping coffee while watching the sunrise over the mountains. Just as she was getting into the rhythm of her work, a shiny black car pulled up on the dirt road. Out stepped a tall man in a dark suit. He introduced himself as Mr. Jensen, the head of the Homeowners Association, or HOA for short. He had a stern look on his face and spoke in a serious tone. "I am here to inform you that this land is under HOA jurisdiction. You cannot build here." Shocked, Laura asked, "What do you mean?" "I have all the permits. I checked with the city hall." Mr. Jensen shook his head. "The permits are only valid if you own the land. We have documents that claim this land belongs to the HOA. You need to stop construction immediately." Laura's heart sank. How could this be? She had done everything right. Determined not to back down, she replied, "I have the deeds. I can show you that this land is mine. I bought it fair and square." Mr. Jensen appeared unimpressed. "The HOA has authority in this area. We don't allow any building without our approval, and you didn't seek ours." He motioned to a group of people standing behind him. They were members of the HOA, nodding in agreement. Feeling discouraged, Laura watched as they all left in their fancy cars. Claiming her dream once again felt far out of reach. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. Questions raced through her mind. Was Mr. Jensen telling the truth? Did the HOA really have control over her land? The next day, Laura decided to investigate. She visited the local library and dug through old maps and records. After hours of searching, she found the original land survey. It clearly showed that her property was indeed hers. No HOA restrictions were mentioned. Feeling a wave of hope, Laura made copies of the documents and prepared to confront the HOA. The following week, a meeting was scheduled for all the people in the neighborhood to discuss the building situation. Laura took a deep breath and decided to attend. A sense of nervousness washed over her as she entered the community center, where the meeting was held. Residents were gathered, some chatting, and others quietly sipping coffee. She spotted Mr. Jensen at the front, leading the discussion. When he noticed Laura, he frowned, clearly remembering their last encounter. Laura waited her turn and stood up, papers in hand. "Excuse me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I wish to address the claims made against my land and my cabin." The room quieted. Mr. Jensen glared at her, but signaled for her to continue. "I have documents showing that I own my property, and there are no restrictions from the HOA." She handed out copies of the survey to everyone present. The tension in the room was palpable. Some members of the HOA looked uneasy as they glanced at the papers. Mrs. Vance, a kind older lady, stood up. "Laura, we want to understand the situation better. Can we see what you have?" With their attention on her, Laura explained everything slowly and clearly. She pointed out the survey and mentioned that she had followed all the right steps to get her permits. The crowd began to murmur, some in agreement, others still confused. As the discussion went on, it seemed like more people sided with Laura. Mr. Jensen, however, wasn't ready to simply let it go. "This is our neighborhood," he argued. "We have rules to keep it safe and beautiful." But Laura responded, "I want my cabin to blend in. I want it to be a peaceful place that respects nature." She felt passionate, and her words seemed to reach some of the residents. Many nodded, seeing the excitement and warmth in her ideas. The turning point came when Mr. Thompson, a longtime resident and member of the HOA, stood up. I think we should allow Laura to build her cabin. If she follows the rules and respects the land, she should be given a chance." The room erupted in discussions, and eventually, the other members started agreeing with Mr. Thompson. The atmosphere began to shift, creating a wave of support for Laura's dream. Realizing that the crowd was turning in her favor, Laura felt a rush of hope. After much debate, the HOA decided to form a committee to review her building plans and the land documents more carefully. They agreed to work with Laura to ensure her cabin would fit within the community's spirit and regulations. With a smile on her face, Laura thanked everyone and took a moment to breathe. She had faced obstacles, but she stood her ground and fought for her dream. Now, she could finally begin building her mountain cabin. Weeks later, with the HOA committee's help, Laura started construction. Neighbors stopped by to offer encouragement and advice. Children in the community would wave as she worked, excited about the cozy cabin taking shape. As Laura placed a final beam in her dream cabin, she realized what she had fought for. It wasn't just about the cabin. It was also about community. She had worked with her neighbors to find a way forward. The mountains stood tall around her, witnessing her journey, and for the first time, Laura felt she truly belonged. And so, with every nail she drove in, she created a home, a place of peace, and a symbol of hope. Laura knew her mountain cabin would not only be a cozy retreat, but also a reminder that dreams can flourish, even amidst challenges. In a small town nestled between the mountains, there lived a man named Jake. For years, he had dreamed of building a cozy cabin in the woods where he could escape the noise of the city. One sunny morning, after saving up for many years, he finally decided to make his dream a reality. With all the necessary permits in hand, he felt ready to start his new life in the great outdoors. Jake found a beautiful piece of land at the foot of a majestic mountain. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, and colorful birds flitted from branch to branch. It was the perfect spot for a cabin. With a twinkle in his eye, he envisioned the days he would spend hiking, fishing, and enjoying the natural beauty that surrounded him. Excitement filled the air as Jake began to clear the land. He envisioned a sturdy log cabin with a large porch where he could sit and sip coffee while watching the sunrise. But as he got to work, an unexpected challenge soon appeared. A few days later, as Jake was digging the foundation for his cabin, a group of people approached him. They wore matching shirts that said Mountain Heights Homeowners Association. Their leader, a stern woman named Mrs. Larson, stepped forward with a clipboard in hand. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked sharply. "I'm building my cabin," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice calm. Mrs. Larson raised an eyebrow. "You can't build here. This land belongs to the HOA. We own the surrounding area." Confused, Jake pulled out the permits he had painstakingly obtained. "I have all the necessary permits. The town gave me approval. This land is mine," he insisted, showing her the paperwork. Mrs. Larson looked unimpressed. "Those permits mean nothing here. The HOA has its own rules." She turned to the rest of her group. "We should report this to the authorities." Jake's heart sank. He couldn't believe it. The HOA was threatening to stop his dream before it even started. As the group left, he stood alone on his land, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. Determined to fight for his right to build, Jake decided to attend the next HOA meeting. It was held at a community center, where the walls were adorned with old photographs of the mountain range. He was nervous, but knew he had to stand up for himself. That evening, the room buzzed with chatter as the members spoke about community issues. Jake took a deep breath and raised his hand when he saw Mrs. Larson take the stage. "Excuse me, everyone," he said, his voice a little shaky. "My name is Jake, and I want to address the claims about my land." Several heads turned in his direction, some interested and others skeptical. Jake spoke passionately, explaining how he obtained the permits and why he wanted to build a cabin. He shared his love for nature and the joy he felt at the prospect of living among the trees. After his speech, he hoped for support, but Mrs. Larson stepped up. "Unfortunately, the HOA rules are clear. You need our approval, and we cannot allow construction on this land." Frustration boiled inside him, and he realized he needed help. He decided to seek the advice of a local lawyer, Mr. Thompson, a kind man who had helped many in the community. Mr. Thompson listened intently as Jake shared his story. "It seems to have a strong case," he said with a reassuring smile. "But we need to gather more evidence to confirm your right to build." With Mr. Thompson's guidance, Jake gathered documents, photographs, and maps that outlined the boundaries of his land. The two men visited the town hall to confirm the original land grants. Days turned into weeks as they worked tirelessly to construct a solid case. Finally, the day of the big meeting arrived. Jake was ready to defend his right to build. The room was packed with HOA members, and he could feel the tension in the air. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Mrs. Larson took the floor first, presenting her argument against Jake's cabin. She claimed that the land rules had been overlooked and that his building would disrupt the community's harmony. Jake listened closely, mentally preparing for his counter-argument. Then it was Jake's turn. Standing confidently before the crowd, he shared his research. He showed the maps, the permits, and even included testimonies from his neighbors who supported his dream. The room was silent as he made his case that the land was rightfully his and that building the cabin would only contribute positively to the community. In that moment, he spotted a few members nodding in agreement. Encouraged, Jake continued passionately, explaining how he planned to plant trees and create a little garden around his cabin, enhancing the beauty of the area. When he finished speaking, a murmur spread through the room. Some members began to clap, and Jake felt a rush of hope. He looked at Mrs. Larson, who appeared visibly shaken. She quickly gathered herself and challenged him again, but he was ready. "You may not agree with my vision, but we need to work together to create a community that supports everyone," Jake argued. "Isn't that what we all want?" After a few more exchanges, the group decided to vote on whether Jake could build his cabin. The tension in the room was thick as the ballot boxes were passed around. After what felt like an eternity, the votes were tallied. Jake's heart raced as the head of the HOA announced the results. "By a majority vote, we support your right to build a cabin, Jake." Cheers erupted in the room, and Jake felt tears of joy well in his eyes. He was overwhelmed with relief and happiness. The crowd applauded, and even some of the HOA members approached him with congratulations. Mrs. Larson, though displeased, had to accept the decision. With the support of the community behind him, Jake finally broke ground on his beautiful cabin. He worked hard, pouring his heart and soul into every log he laid. Finally, after months of labor, the cabin stood proud against the backdrop of the mountains. As he sat on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee one early morning, Jake smiled, feeling a sense of belonging he had longed for. He had built not just a cabin, but a life filled with dreams, community, and the beauty of "I am a story writing tool. I'm sorry, I can only provide a story based on a prompt." The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as I surveyed the land. My land. For years, I dreamed of building a cabin here, a place to escape the city's relentless hum and reconnect with nature. Finally, after saving every penny and navigating a mountain of paperwork, the dream was becoming a reality. The permits were secured, the blueprints finalized, and the construction crew was scheduled to arrive next week. My name is Ben, and I work as a software engineer in the city. I'm not someone who seeks conflict. I prefer the quiet solitude of coding and hiking. But something told me this cabin project wouldn't be as peaceful as I envisioned. The first sign of trouble appeared in the form of a letter, a sternly worded letter from the Hemlock Ridge Homeowners Association HOA. I hadn't even broken ground yet, and they were already claiming my cabin violated some obscure covenant in their bylaws. I chuckled, thinking it was just a misunderstanding. I had all the permits, and my land was clearly marked. The Hemlock Ridge HOA was notorious in the area, a group of retirees with too much time on their hands and an insatiable appetite for control. They were known for nitpicking everything from lawn heights to mailbox designs. I'd heard stories of their petty squabbles and relentless pursuit of rule breakers. I hoped I wouldn't become one of their targets. I decided to attend their next meeting, hoping to clear things up. The meeting was held in a small, stuffy community center, the air thick with unspoken grievances. As I walked in, I was met with suspicious stares. The HOA president, a woman named Margaret with a permanent frown etched on her face, called a meeting to order. She was a formidable presence, her voice sharp and unwavering. I waited patiently for my turn to speak, feeling increasingly like an intruder. When Margaret finally acknowledged me, her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice dripping with disapproval, "we understand you're planning to build a cabin on what you believe is your property." "That's correct," I replied, try to keep my tone polite. "I have all the necessary permits from the county." Margaret waved a dismissive hand. "Permits don't supersede our covenants. We believe your proposed cabin encroaches on common land owned by the HOA. I was stunned. "That's impossible," I said, pulling out my survey map. "My property lines are clearly marked. I've had it surveyed twice." Another member of the HOA, a wiry man named Arthur, spoke up. "We've been maintaining that land for years. We have a right to it." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. I felt like I was facing a firing squad. I tried to reason with them, explaining that I had done my due diligence, but they wouldn't listen. They were convinced I was trying to steal their land. Leaving the meeting, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-blown conflict. I knew I had to fight back. I contacted a lawyer, Sarah, who specialized in property disputes. She listened patiently as I recounted the situation, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "This is a classic HOA power play," she said. "They're hoping to bully you into backing down, but you have the permits, and you have a clear title to the land. We can fight this." Sarah sent the HOA a strongly worded letter, reiterating my legal right to build on my property. For a while, things were quiet. I dared to hope that the HOA had finally realized they were wrong, but my hope was short-lived. A few days before construction was scheduled to begin, I received another letter from the HOA. This time, it was a cease and desist order, threatening legal action if I proceeded with the construction. I was furious. They were escalating the situation, trying to intimidate me. I refused to be bullied. I called Sarah, and we decided to move forward with the construction as planned. The day the construction crew arrived, I felt a sense of nervous anticipation. As the first bulldozer rumbled onto the property, I saw a group of people approaching. It was the HOA, led by Margaret, their faces contorted with anger. "Stop," Margaret shouted, her voice shrill. "You can't build here. This is our land." I stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "Margaret, I have all the permits. This is my property. You can't stop me." "We'll see about that," she retorted, pulling out her phone. "I'm calling the police." The police arrived, and I explained the situation, presenting my permits and survey map. The officer listened patiently, then turned to Margaret. "Ma'am," he said, "Mr. Miller has all the necessary permits. He has the right to build on his property. You'll have to take this up with the courts." Margaret glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "We'll find a way to stop you." Despite the HOA's threats, the construction continued. I watched as the foundation was laid, the walls went up, and the roof was installed. With each passing day, the cabin took shape, becoming more and more like the dream I had carried for so long. But the HOA didn't give up. They filed a lawsuit claiming that my cabin violated their covenants and encroached on their land. The legal battle dragged on for months, draining my savings and testing my patience. Sarah was a constant source of support, guiding me through the complex legal process. She was confident that we would win, but the stress was still immense. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. I sat in the courtroom, feeling a mixture of anxiety and determination. Margaret and the other HOA members were there, their faces grim. The judge listened to both sides of the argument, carefully reviewing the evidence. After what seemed like an eternity, he rendered his verdict. Based on the evidence presented, he said, "I find in favor of the defendant, Mr. Miller. He has all the necessary permits, and his property lines are clearly established. The HOA's claims are without merit." A wave of relief washed over me. I had won. The HOA's attempt to stop me had failed. Leaving the courthouse, I felt a sense of triumph. I had stood up to the bullies and defended my right to build my dream cabin. The construction was completed a few weeks later. I stood on the porch, gazing at the surrounding mountains, feeling a sense of peace and contentment. The cabin was everything I had hoped for, a sanctuary from the chaos of the city. The HOA still glared at me whenever I drove through Hemlock Ridge, but I didn't care. I had won the battle, and I had built my cabin. It was a testament to my perseverance and a symbol of my freedom. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the mountains, I knew I had made the right decision. The cabin was more than just a building. It was a symbol of my dreams, my resilience, and my unwavering determination to pursue what I believed in. And no HOA, no matter how powerful, could ever take that away from me. The crisp mountain air bit my cheeks as I surveyed the plot of land. Finally, after years of saving and planning, my dream was about to become a reality. A cozy cabin nestled amongst the pines. The building permits were secured, the blueprints finalized, and the construction crew was scheduled to arrive next week. Excitement bubbled inside me, a stark contrast to the serene stillness of the mountains. My name is Ethan, and for as long as I can remember, I've yearned for a place to escape the city's relentless noise and chaos. This plot, tucked away on the outskirts of the small mountain town of Havenwood, was perfect. It was secluded, yet accessible, with a breathtaking view of the valley below. The land was a steal, too. I'd bought it from old Mrs. Gable, a sweet woman who'd lived in Havenwood her whole life. She was practically giving it away, claiming she was too old to manage it anymore. The only potential snag she'd mentioned was a Havenwood Homeowners Association, or HOA. Apparently, they had a reputation for being particular. I dismissed her concerns. I had my permits. My paperwork was in order, and I was confident I could handle a few grumpy neighbors. How wrong I was. The first sign of trouble came a week before construction was set to begin. A stern-faced woman with tightly wound gray hair and a tailor blazer marched up to my property as I was marking the boundary lines. "You must be Mr. Miller," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through granite. "I'm Patricia, the president of the Havenwood HOA." I introduced myself, extending a hand which she ignored. "We need to talk about your project," she said, her nose wrinkling as if the very idea of my cabin offended her. "I have all the necessary permits," I stated, trying to keep my tone polite. "Permits can be overlooked," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "The HOA believes this land belongs to the community. It's designated as common area." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I have the deed, the title insurance. Everything's in my name." Patricia's lips curled into a tight smile. "We have records that predate your acquisition, records that show this land was always intended for the use of Havenwood residents." A knot formed in my stomach. I knew HOAs could be difficult, but this was outright land theft. "I'm sorry, but I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm proceeding with my construction." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I wouldn't advise that, Mr. Miller. We have ways of making things difficult for those who don't cooperate." She turned and marched back to her shiny SUV, leaving me standing there, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. I spent the next few days in a frantic scramble, contacting my lawyer, reviewing my documents, and triple-checking every detail of the land purchase. Everything was in order. My lawyer, a seasoned professional named Sarah, assured me that the HOA's claim was likely a bluff. "They're probably just trying to intimidate you," she said. "HOAs often try to throw their weight around, but if you have the legal paperwork, they don't have a leg to stand on." Reassured, I decided to proceed with the construction. The crew arrived on Monday morning, and the sound of hammers and saws echoed through the valley. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to relax and imagine evenings spent by the fireplace, reading a book and listening to the wind rustling through the trees. My peace was short-lived. On Tuesday afternoon, a group of Havenwood residents, led by Patricia, descended upon the construction site. They carried signs that read, "Save our common land," and "Stop the illegal construction." They stood in front of the bulldozer, preventing it from moving forward. I rushed to the site, my heart pounding. "What's going on here?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Patricia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "We're not going to let you destroy our community land, Mr. Miller. We're prepared to do whatever it takes to stop you." A man in the crowd, who I later learned was named George, A retired accountant and a devoted member of the HOA yelled, "You can't just come in here and take what's ours." I tried to reason with them, explaining that I had all the legal documents, but they wouldn't listen. They were convinced that I was trying to steal their land. The situation escalated quickly, with shouting and accusations flying back and forth. Finally, the local sheriff arrived and managed to disperse the crowd, but the damage was done. The construction crew, unnerved by the confrontation, threatened to quit. Over the next few weeks, the HOA launched a full-scale war against me. They filed frivolous lawsuits, claiming I was violating various obscure Havenwood ordinances. They sent me endless letters filled with legal jargon and threats. They even started a smear campaign, spreading rumors about me throughout the town, painting me as a greedy outsider trying to exploit their community. The stress was overwhelming. I barely slept, my appetite vanished, and I was constantly on edge. Sarah, my lawyer, was doing her best to fight back, but the legal battles were draining my resources and my spirit. One evening, as I was sitting in my empty apartment, staring at the blueprints of my dream cabin, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Maybe Patricia was right. Maybe I was just an outsider trying to force my way into a community that didn't want me. Maybe I should just give up. But then I thought of Mrs. Gable, the woman who sold me the land. I remembered her kind eyes and her gentle smile. I couldn't let Patricia and the HOA bully me into abandoning my dream, especially after Mrs. Gable had trusted me with her land. I decided to fight back. I started by doing my own research, digging through old town records and historical archives. I spent hours in the local library, poring over dusty documents and handwritten notes. And then I found something. A faded map, dating back to the early 1900s, showed the original boundaries of Havenwood. And there, clear as day, was a plot of land I owned, marked as private property, not common area. Armed with this new evidence, I contacted a local journalist, a young woman named Emily, who was eager to make a name for herself. I told her my story, showed her the map, and provided her with all the documentation I had. Emily ran with the story, publishing a detailed article in the Havenwood Gazette, exposing the HOA's dubious claims and highlighting their bullying tactics. The article sparked outrage in the community, with many residents expressing their support for me and condemning the HOA's actions. The tide had turned. At the next HOA meeting, Patricia was forced to address the accusations. She tried to defend her position, but her arguments fell flat in the face of the overwhelming evidence. The other members of the HOA, realizing they'd been misled, voted to remove her as president and drop all legal action against me. A week later, I received a letter from the new HOA president, apologizing for the trouble I had been through and assuring me that they would no longer interfere with my construction. The construction resumed, and this time there were no protesters, no lawsuits, and no threats. The cabin was finally completed, and it was even more beautiful than I had imagined. Standing on the porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in hues of orange and gold, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment wash over me. I had faced a powerful adversary and emerged victorious.